All right, today we're going to get into something big, an argument that's really picking up steam. The idea is that the world's trust in the US dollar, the thing that basically underpins the whole global financial system, is starting to crack. So, what's really going on here? Let's get right into it.
Wow. Okay, that's a really intense metaphor, right? A noose around your neck. That's from an analysis by Peter Schiff, and it's pretty chilling. It really makes you stop and think, how could holding the world's number one currency feel so dangerous?
And that's exactly the question we're digging into today. I mean, how did we get here? How did the dollar get described in such a threatening way? Let's break down this argument piece by piece. Okay, so the main idea we're exploring is this. The dollar just isn't seen as that 100% safe bet it used to be. You could say a seed of doubt has been planted, and it's starting to grow all over the world. For as long as most of us can remember, countries all over the globe have stocked up on US dollars. It was the smart thing to do. It greased the wheels of international trade. It helped keep their own economies stable. It was the ultimate safe haven. But the argument we're looking at today says that's changing. That fundamental belief is shifting, and a lot of nations are starting to get, well, pretty nervous.
So the big question is, what triggered this? What happened? Well, according to this analysis, it wasn't some slow, gradual decline. It was more like a sudden shockwave that just shot through the entire global financial system.
And here's the event that's pointed to as the main catalyst, those huge, unprecedented economic sanctions that the Biden administration put on Russia. The moment the US did that, using its power over the dollar system, it sent a really loud message to every other country out there. So you can see the chain reaction right here. The US hits Russia with massive sanctions. Then, other countries holding dollars look at this and think, whoa, if they can do that to Russia, what's stopping them from doing it to us? And just like that, confidence starts to crumble. The dollar suddenly goes from being this neutral, safe tool for everyone to use to looking a lot more like a political weapon. Now, this whole crisis of confidence isn't just happening in a bubble. It completely shifts the playing field, especially when it comes to another global superpower, a country that happens to be the biggest donor of US debt, China. And Peter Schiff's argument continues on this path, saying that in this new environment, with the dollar looking a bit shaky, the US suddenly has to be very careful with China. But why? Well, it all boils down to a massive economic imbalance between the two. And this really lays it out in black and white. You've got the United States on one side, the world's biggest debtor, and on the other side, you've got China, its biggest creditor, holding just enormous amounts of US debt. I mean, that sets up an incredibly tricky power dynamic, to say the least. So, this leads to the huge multi-trillion-dollar question, right? What happens if China, your number one lender, turns around and says, you know what? We don't want to use your dollar anymore. What happens then? The analysis on this is, well, it's pretty blunt. A move like that from China would be, in a word, catastrophic for the US economy. It would kick off a major crisis. And what that means, really, is that this situation gives China a ton of leverage. Okay, so this puts everyone in a really tough spot. If countries are getting skittish about the dollar, where else do they go? Where's the new safe haven? Is there one? The obvious first thought might be, well, what about the Chinese yuan? But here's the catch. According to this argument, it has a huge trust issue. See, for a currency to be the world's reserve, people need to trust that it's transparent and can be traded freely. But the yuan is so tightly controlled by the government that it just isn't seen as a reliable alternative. Well, not right now anyway. And it's not just a problem with the yuan. The analysis goes on to say that the other big players aren't looking so hot either. The euro, it's got its own set of problems, trying to manage a bunch of very different economies. The Japanese yen, it's been dealing with a stagnant economy for decades. So it really feels like everywhere you turn, there's a major flaw. So yeah, the whole world is basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. The US dollar, the old reliable safe haven, suddenly looks risky. But then you look at all the other options, and they've all got their own serious issues. And all of this really paints a picture of a global financial system that's way more fragile and uncertain than we might like to think. It's a really sobering question to ask. I mean, think about it. If the very foundation of how the world does business starts to shake, and you don't have any strong pillars to put in its place, the whole building starts to look pretty unstable. So what we've really done here is walk through this one very powerful argument, an argument that faith in the US dollar is fading and that there's no obvious replacement waiting in the wings. It shows us a system that's under a lot of stress, and frankly, there are no easy answers in sight. And that's the big idea we want to leave you with. When trust in all the major currencies starts to fray, it forces you to ask a much deeper question. What is real value? What does a truly safe asset even look like anymore?